For this module, I want to build on the plunk that we've been working on for several modules now, only this time we're going to tear it apart and put it back together and use it with routing. We'll have all the same features we currently have, plus we're going to add a feature. And what we'll find out is that routing actually makes some things easier. For one, we can start dividing responsibilities between searching for user information versus displaying user information. But before we get to any of that, we need to at least get set up for routing. So the first thing I will do is make sure I go out and add that Angular route script that I can find if I do a search for Angular route. Now you notice I get a couple search results here, Angular route and Angular router. It's Angular route that I want. It has the most up-to-date version of Angular route. I'll just click the button and that will add an additional script file for me in my page. This one going to code.angular.js and it's picking up angularroute.js. And now that we have that script included, the next step would be to set ourselves up so that we can configure the routing engine. One place we could do that is inside of script.js where we create our GitHub viewer module. But script.js is already a little bit full. It's really where we have main controller defined. So I would like to remove the creation of this GitHub viewer module from script.js and move it to a new file where we will create that module and also add the configuration. So create a new file. This one I'll call app.js because this is really what's going to define the application. And it's inside of here where I can have an IFI, where I can have a line that will define the module. And what we're going to find is that we can run and register configuration functions against our application. And it's inside of this configuration function where we can define our routes. And now that's cleanly separated out from script.js, which is just going to get a reference to GitHub viewer. And before I forget, we will need to add app.js to the list of scripts that need to be included here. This one has to come before the other scripts because it is the one that is defining the module. And actually script.js, I'm going to go ahead and rename that to main controller because that is really what is inside of script.js. If I double click the file name, I can rename this main controller.js. And now we're a little further along. So app.config, that's a new API we haven't seen yet, but I'm essentially telling Angular, here is a configuration function to run when you're bringing this module to life. And so Angular will do this early on in the life cycle of the application. And it's inside of here where I can configure the route provider. But in order to do that, I need to tell Angular that I have a dependency on ng-route. So it's not enough just to put that angular-route.js script into the page. I also explicitly have to tell Angular, ng-route is another module that my module needs. Only then will route provider be available to me. And here's what I'm thinking we will do with route provider. What I'm picturing is that eventually we will have three separate views, three separate sections of the application. There will be a main section. This is going to contain the search form that we currently have, where a user can type in a name and click a search button and go off and search for a user. But that's just going to be one view, and searching is the only thing that view is going to do. When a user of this application completes a search, we're going to send them over to a user.html view and controller, and that's where we will present the results. I also plan on adding a new feature to this application, which is the ability to drill into a repository and see some details. Someone can do that just by clicking a link inside of that user view. It will take them over to the repo view. And all of this is going to require the proper route configuration, as well as some changes to index.html, because we have to turn that into a layout view. And most of the HTML that's in there now is going to need to be broken out into some of these other views. But first, the routing configuration. With the route provider, and we'll just do one of these right now, I can describe the route that I want it to look for. So I could say that if the user comes to the entry of this application, the root of this application, just slash, then go to this controller with this view. But I'm going to make the main view, the entry point for the application, something that will appear on the screen when the user is at /main. And I need to tell Angular, when it does see this URL, here is the template to load, main.html, and here is the controller to use, which is the main controller. So Angular will go out and fetch that view, put it into the DOM, create a main controller, put it in charge of that template, and then we'll be off and running. The other thing that I can do with the routing engine is I can tell it, if you see a URL that you don't understand, so it's not one of the URLs that have been listed previously, it's not /main at this point, We'll add some other routes in just a bit. But otherwise, if you don't know what else to do, I want you to redirect to /main. And now what the routing engine can do is if someone for some reason comes in to /unknown URL, what the routing engine will do is send them to /main, which will bring up our search form. Let's just see if we can get this part working. Index.html will need to become a layout view, a shell view. Let's say that it's going to have a body and a header that appears on every page. We'll say GitHub Viewer. I will remove that responsibility from the main controller. Instead, we're just going to have it hard-coded here. We could also have a navigational menu up here at the top, but we'll display GitHub Viewer, and then everything else will be controlled by the routing engine. I will put in an ng-view directive. So that is where the routing engine will load these different templates. And now this existing markup that I have inside of here, I'm going to need to change it around a bit, but I'm going to cut it out of this page. This is all we need now inside of index.html. I'm going to take that HTML and I'm going to put it inside of main.html and set it up so that it works correctly. But this is a new file, main.html, paste in what we have, and now I don't need this to be a body tag, so I will change that to being just a div. I no longer need to specify which controller to use because that's going to be specified in the routing rules. This is optional. You don't have to specify the controller here, and you can still specify the controller in the template. But I'm going to remove it from here and allow the routing rules to figure out which controller is going to be in charge. We don't need the message anymore. And let me beautify things a little bit to get the indentation. That's better. Actually, we don't need the error here because this view will no longer have the search results. I don't need user details anymore. It is just going to be that search form and the countdown timer that main controller will be responsible for. So to see if we can get this page on the screen, the other piece I'm going to need to rip apart is main controller. Right now it does the searching and display of user data. I'm going to make a copy of everything in this file, create a new file called user-controller.js, and paste it in here. We will come back to this file later and fix it up. We need to remove some features from this file. But right now, I want to remove some things from main controller that I no longer need. For instance, this controller no longer needs the GitHub service. All it's going to do is present the search form and send things off to another controller and template to do the actual search. And in fact, I'm going to get rid of log and anchor scroll also. The only thing this controller is going to work with is scope, interval, and location. I'll show you why we need location in just a bit. I don't have to worry when the user search is finished. I don't need to worry about when repository searches are finished or when there's an error. I do need my function to decrement a countdown, to start a countdown, to manage the countdown. And now inside of search, we no longer call into GitHub. I still want to manage the countdown interval. This is the place where I will need to place some code so that we go off to the right route where we will actually search and display this user that we're looking for. And now just to fix up a few last things, we'll still have a default username. I don't need a message or a repository sort order. I just need countdown related logic. So now main controller, much smaller. It's focused on one thing, which is to manage that search form and to manage a countdown to perform an automatic search if the user doesn't search first. And now let's take a look at this in the preview window. In fact, I went to look at it in an external window to show you a couple features here. The countdown timer still works. I'm still presenting the search form. If I open up the developer tools, I don't see any errors. These are all good signs that things are working. Of course, now we're not actually doing the search. That's a feature that we'll tie in next. But I do want to call your attention to the URL. It now has a hash sign in it and a /main. And that is what the routing engine is using to determine where to go. When I tell the routing engine to go to /main and to load up the main controller, that's exactly what it's doing because we are at /main. We're using client fragment section of the URL, the thing that comes after the pound sign. That's what Angular uses by default. And unfortunately, this address bar, you cannot modify it when it's being run in Plunker. But if I were to try to come to something like #/user, which we don't have defined as a route yet, the routing engine would redirect me back here to #/main. So this part appears to be working. Next, let's get the user details display back.